Hi, my name is Gianna Cataloni, and this is my presentation on voting rights for women and what caused the delay of the 19th Amendment. The fight for women to have the right to vote started decades before the Civil War and lasted around 100 years. Many people did not believe women had the knowledge or capability to vote. Their job was to cook, clean, and take care of the children, but women had so much more potential than this. Although the fight for women's suffrage was delayed by the wars, disagreements between the women's organizations, and the fight for other people's rights, the creation of the women's organizations, protests, strikes, ultimately led for the right of women to vote and the 19th Amendment. The fight for women's rights started in 1840. This started with two women named Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They were banned from going to the Anti-Slavery Convention. This sparked the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848, and because of this, California broadened property rights to women. Women were off to a good start until the war broke out from 1861 to 1865. After the war ended, the American Equal Rights Association was formed by Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. This association was formed to provide equal rights to anyone, no matter your gender or race. At the end of 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified. This actually made matters worse for women because it identified citizens and voters as only being male. There was major disagreement over the 14th Amendment. Women were angered because it only considered men as citizens. This brings up the 15th Amendment, giving African American men the right to vote. Although this was an amazing accomplishment, the women's suffrage movement was still being ignored. This sparked the creation of the National Women's Suffrage Association by Anthony and Stanton and the American Women's Suffrage Association by Lucy Stone, Henry Blackwell, and Julia Howe. They created these organizations to fight for more rights using an approach that targeted individual state constitutions. The members of the NWSA wanted to create a 16th Amendment that would give rights to everyone, but in 1871, Victoria Woodhull wanted to give women the right to vote under the 14th Amendment, although this never happened. Anthony, along with 15 other women, illegally voted in the 1872 election, and they were all arrested. A huge reason people did not want women to vote is because they were worried women would vote to ban the sale of liquor, which sounds crazy. This did not stop Wyoming from becoming the first state to grant women the right to vote, as many states followed. In the years to come, the talk of women's rights became a part of everyone's daily lives. I also found it interesting that the 19th Amendment had the same exact wording as the proposed women's suffrage amendment, but was not ratified until 42 years later after this proposed amendment. In 1894, another attempt to ratify the women's suffrage amendment was turned down after 600,000 people signed for the amendment. This was another setback, but 2 years later, Idaho grants women the right to vote, with Washington and New York to follow. The National Association opposed to women's suffrage was ran by Mrs. Arthur Dodge. This organization begins to make a lot of progress and gets the women's suffrage recognized and supported at the national level. Starting in 1918, a debate on women's suffrage is extended to the House of Representatives by Jeannette Rankin. The women's suffrage amendment was passed in the House, but it did not succeed to gain the two-thirds majority in the Senate. Although this was a setback, President Woodrow Wilson announces that he will back the federal women's suffrage amendment. In 1919, the 19th Amendment is passed by the Senate and the process of ratification is initiated. The right for women to vote is officially ratified in 1920. Although it took around 100 years, women never gave up and fought for what they deserved. So what was the real cause of the delay of the 19th Amendment? There are many different theories that are believed to be the reason for the delay of the woman's right to vote. It could be argued that there were multiple events that took place that caused this delay. Although there is no definite or confirmed reason for the delay, certain events happened that were believed to push back the right for women's votes. According to Dr. Kayleen Hughes, the women's suffrage movement was delayed because of the wars, specifically World War I, which took place from 1914 to 1918. Many women put their fight for equality aside to focus on helping with the war. Women took on jobs such as nurses, relief workers, physicians, telephone operators, ambulance drivers, entertainers, and soldier supporters. Women also willingly chose to partake in home front activities and defense industry work. They took on jobs that were typically a man's job. Women put all their time and effort into these jobs and helping with the war that they did not have time to focus on women's suffrage and getting the right to vote. Although this delayed the women's suffrage movement, their wars had also had a positive effect on the movement. Dr. Hughes states that the willingness of the majority of suffragists a century ago to temporarily set aside their personal quests for the vote in order to back the United States in its first major overseas war proved to be a deciding factor in helping them to obtain that long-sought goal. Other people blame the delay of women's rights to vote on something other than the war. According to the book Perspectives on Women's Right to Vote, from the perspective of many politicians and public figures in these regions, the idea of granting females the vote symbolized a disruption to the American way of life as they knew it. It was engraved in people's heads that there was no reason for women to vote, and if they could vote, then they would vote the opposite of men. This book also attributes the delay to the controversy and differences between the American Women's Suffrage Association and the National Women's Suffrage Association. These organizations had a difference of opinions, although they were fighting for the same cause. Since the AWSA and the NWSA could not agree on the same thing, it showed that they were not on the same page, which could be seen as disorganized. This was not a good look for women, as they needed to be unified to get the right to vote. My last source takes on a different view on what caused the delay of women's right to vote. According to Stephen M. Buehler, it would be too risky to link the goal of black suffrage and civil rights with that of female suffrage. This strategy called for immediate work on black men's rights with vague promises of subsequent effort on behalf of female suffrage. Buehler believed that the fight for black men to vote delayed the fight for women to vote. Since the only people considered eligible to vote were men, they thought it was more fitting for black men to vote before women could. Male reformers did not want women and black men to get the right to vote at the same time, so they focused on black men voting first. This delayed the women's suffrage movement. Although World War I, the opinions of the U.S. Congress, the differences between the NWSA and the AWSA, and the 15th Amendment caused delays, women continued to fight through these. As I stated earlier, the women's suffrage movement took around 100 years, and my four sources shows and explains why it took so long for women to get these rights. The fight for complete equal equality is still going on, and I believe we will get there one day. Thank you.